Thank you, everybody, so much for joining. This is such a treat again to see you all. So as before, just a reminder, we'll be doing a little bit of preliminary explanation. I'll guide a preliminary meditation in a couple of minutes, then some talk, and then some longer meditation, a 10-minute meditation at the end. So as I'd mentioned before, the purpose of these classes is to help us to build or anchor some inner habit of meditation, or to go deeper, or just to begin to explore this topic and this practice. So the main meditation we'll be doing regularly in these sessions is just a simple, maybe the simplest meditation of becoming aware of our body. So we'll do that in a minute. The reason that we come back to this is that our body we often forget about it, right? Because as I've said before, we're storytelling primates, but we can get a little bit too much caught up in the story part of things and forget that we're grounded in this very, very human body, and it's a little bit like an animal body, but that's, traditionally in Western society, that was used as a criticism, actually in a lot of societies used as a criticism. But we can think of that just with some respect, right? We need to have respect. As modern people, we're wise enough to realize we need some respect for nature. So good news is you've got nature living in your house with you. You're part of nature. Our bodies and minds are part of nature. We're natural creatures. And learning to live in harmony with nature starts by learning to live in harmony with our own body and our own mind, and just beginning to realize that it takes a bit of a skillful approach. Nature is full of systems and feedback systems, and we need to be listening and attentive to the feedback that our body is giving and the feedback we're getting from our mind about whether we're on the right track or not. So meditation allows us to become aware of the feedback that we're getting from our body that we may not be listening to. It was simply just not hearing or not feeling the sensations in the soles of our feet, the sensations in the palm of our hands, the sensations in our back, in our chest, the feeling of our breathing, and so forth. When you start to listen to them, there's actually a ton of information, if you want, coming from our body all the time. And that information is often skewed. It's a little bit biased. It's not just neutral information. It's a little bit like the news. It tends to either be good news or bad news. So is the information coming from our body, is it good news or is it bad news? So if we've got a lot of accumulated stress in our life, right? We know people talk. It's sort of common in our vernacular in society, the way we can hold stress in our body, right? We know that phrase. It's massage therapists use that to encourage you to go get a massage at their parlor. Like, we hold stress in our bodies. Come get a massage with us. It'll help relax your body and ease that stress. So we know how we can hold stress in our body, and that actually helps to persist mental patterns and mental habits that are stressed out mental habits and reactionary mental habits and overwhelmed mental habits of feeling like we are overwhelmed. But here's the good news. We can also persist feelings of well-being in our body. We can actually have our body generating a sense of well-being that helps to remind our mind that we're okay. And so this is some of what we'll do in this preliminary meditation, becoming aware of our body and beginning to tap into that inner sense of well-being. So we'll do a bit of a preliminary meditation here for a few minutes to get some sense of this, and then we'll talk more about that as we go. Okay, so we can begin by finding a comfortable position. I'll shut my eyes. It helps just to shut out some of the other visual information, but you can meditate with your eyes open. There's pros and cons to both. We just try to sit comfortably. Typically, we'll sit with our back upright so we can not fall asleep and get a little bit of feedback if we're starting to nod off. And then immediately we just start becoming aware of the feelings in our body, whatever they are, the air temperature, the feelings of sitting on our seat, the sensations in our palms and the soles of our feet are a good place to start. We just try to get a general feeling of all the awareness that's coming in through our body, awareness of our surroundings. And one of the easiest things for us to become aware of is the movement of our breath. Just however it's moving, whatever kind of breathing pattern arises. There's some rhythm to this, an expansion and contraction. Expanding as we breathe in, and then contracting and relaxing as we breathe out. And then we can open our eyes and arise from this meditation. So if you feel like that meditation is too short, that's a good thing. That means you like meditation. You want to do more of it. So you can. We'll do a little bit more later, but try to remember that feeling, because it's an important part of building a habit. Is liking something. The most habit forming things in the universe are the things that we like a lot, right? If you think about the things that people really get addicted to, drugs and alcohol are famous, of course, but watching TV or, any kind of addictive behaviors, they're full of reward. They're full of a good feeling, right? At least in the beginning. Sometimes the habit takes over and outlasts the reward and the good experience. But the patterns, I put out a little poll and asked people why they were wanting to join these sessions. And what I heard, there were 4 of you who responded, but what I heard consistently from everybody was just building that habit. And I can 100% identify with the challenge of trying to build a habit of mental peace in the midst of a busy life. So I had the benefit of living in a meditation community, and I had the benefit of having, as part of my job, teaching meditation for full time every day for 10 years. So when you're teaching meditation, that's a great way to build a habit, because you have to show up and you have to meditate. It's the law. You can't miss classes and so forth. So I kind of cheated. And again, I'm back here cheating by helping to build an anchor meditation habit by teaching these classes. You can cheat by getting yourself to attend these classes and meditate with us, with a group. This is the practice of using a social community to sort of help to anchor this habit. But throughout that time that I was teaching meditation as well, I was also very busy, right? Because I was helping to run a meditation center, and I was also doing IT work. So from very early on, I was very familiar with this experience of having a ton of stuff going on, and then also trying to anchor and build a meditation habit. So I've got, I would say, I have infinite sympathy for all of you who have busy lives, but are also trying to build and anchor this habit. One of the benefits of our modern societies, there's a ton of information and research on what it takes to build habits. And so I've just, even over the last few weeks, looking at some of the books. There are a couple of popular books, one called Atomic Habits, and the other called Tiny Habits, that look a little bit more at the research on what it takes to build and anchor habits. So I wanted to use those a little bit to inform this talk, and just talk about what it takes to anchor a habit. So there's always 2 things going on. There's always 2 sort of stable things going on, and 2 active things that happen. So 4 things, right? The 2 stable things are who we think we are, and where we think we are. What context do we think we're living in? So we all have some sense of who we are, a sense of self, and we all have some sense of our context, the world around us. And often that's a very social context, like who's around us. But it varies, right? There's the place around us, the environment that's around us. And in a sense, our body, our body can be either of these. It's interesting. It's very fluid. Our sense of identity is very fluid. Our body can be me. So I can touch my computer. Like if I'm touching my computer with my hand, then I feel like my body is me. But I can look at my hand. And so we have a very fluid sense of self. It expands and contracts. And if we're driving a car and someone almost cuts us off, we can say, he almost hit me. Well, no, he almost hit your car. But at that time, you identify with your car as being part of your sense of self. So our sense of self actually expands and contracts. If you're playing a video game and someone, some video game monster comes at you, you're like, oh, it almost got me, right? So our sense of me or I is amazingly fluid, and we're different people at different times, because the sense of I is actually, it's actually constructed, or it's built up. It's built up by our mental habits. It's a belief. And so one of the things that meditators, especially, I don't know, Buddhist meditation is what I'm most familiar with, but have been doing for a long time, is kind of breaking down or analyzing what we experience and realizing that there's a lot of parts to it. There's your visual awareness, there's what you're hearing, there's what you're feeling, a little bit, to some degree, there's what you're smelling and tasting. And we realize that we actually take all of these different senses and we construct some sense of who we are and where we are and what's happening from that. And it's a mental picture that we build up. So when our body is, so our body forms part of the, is either who we are, is either a part of who we are, or it's part of the context. And so if you have a body that's full of stress, right, that actually makes you, whoever you are, makes you feel more stressed out at that time. But if you have a body that's got a radiant sense of well-being and comfort, like you've just gotten a massage and now you're feeling, oh, so much better, and your mind begins to feel better, like that radiant sense of well-being in the body can radiate into our mental state as well. So I mentioned there's two stable things and then two active things. The stable things, who we think we are. Actually, as I mentioned, it's not really that stable at all, but we think it's stable. And then where we think we are, or the context. Now, from that, there's always a sense of what's happening to us and what we're doing. And those are the two active things, right? The world acts on us, This is like the passive voice in writing, my boss told me to do this, and this project fell apart at work, and the world is crazy, and all this political disaster and whatever else happening around us. That's the stuff that's happening to us. It comes from the outside in. And then there's what we do, and then there's our actions, how we react or how we respond, how we act on the world around us, what we do. And so when we talk about building habits, we actually, it plays into all of these things. It plays into all four of these things. So there is who we think we are, and it actually plays into our habits. And one of my very favorite stories was told by a friend of mine who was very, very charismatic guy, a Brazilian guy who became a monk. But just before he became a monk, he was just a Brazilian guy. And he was a smoker. And he thought, I can't really be a smoker and be a monk. That's not going to be a good compatible habit. That's not going to show a good example of mind control. But he tried many times, year after year, to quit smoking. But it never worked, right? Because he was a smoker, right? So he thought, okay, I'm going to take a smart approach. I'm going to change my sense of who I think I am. And for 10 years, he had thought that he was a smoker. But he thought, okay, now I'm going to start from inside, and I'm going to decide that I am a non-smoker. He identified with being a non-smoker. So he was a non-smoker. He just, in his mind, he decided he was a non-smoker. And then he had a craving for a cigarette come up. He thought, that's funny. Why is a non-smoker having a craving for a cigarette? Okay. Now the craving became stronger and stronger and stronger and stronger. So, okay, a non-smoker is having an overwhelming urge to smoke a cigarette. And so then he would give in to the urge because it became too strong. He went outside and smoked a cigarette. And normally what happened when he smoked a cigarette is when he tried to quit and then smoked, what happened was he thought, okay, well, this clearly indicates I'm a smoker. I don't have the power to quit. It's too strong. And he rebounded immediately to being a smoker. But he thought, no, I'm not going to let that happen. So he smoked a cigarette, but he thought, okay, I'm a non-smoker smoking a cigarette. Now, I'm a non-smoker. I've always been a non-smoker, but I've smoked some cigarettes, when I was really young. Um, so you can be a non-smoker and smoke a cigarette. You think, oh, it's kind of strange feeling, strange habit. Okay, I did that. But we don't have to do that again. If you're a non-smoker, you don't have to smoke again. You can smoke once and then walk away from it. So he decided, okay, I'm a non-smoker. I smoked a cigarette. And what he did then is he didn't reinforce the idea that this habit has enormous power over him. He reinforced the idea that he was a non-smoker, but just thought it was strange behavior. And so that craving came up again and again, as it does. And he gave in periodically, but it happened less and less frequently because he kept reinforcing the idea he was a non-smoker. So and he was able to completely drop that habit by changing his sense of who he was. So right now, you can decide you are a meditator. You can think, I'm a meditator. I just don't meditate that frequently right now. But I meditate. I meditate maybe once or twice a week with this class, and I meditate sometimes. I would like to meditate more often, but you can identify with that habit. And your identity has a huge power because your identity behaviors naturally flow out of that identity. If you identify with being a meditator, what kind of stuff do you do? Well, you meditate. It's not the only thing you do, but behaviors come out of this habit. But the other way you can do it is you can just do something, and just your activities themselves can reinforce a sense of identity. So I like to think about this topic of being a sense of wealth, a sense of abundance. It came up in a previous talk. If you go to the park and you feed the pigeons with crumbs of food, you become a benefactor just because of giving. Like you've given something tiny, a little bit of food, some crumbs to insects. It doesn't have to be pigeons. And some places you're not actually supposed to feed the pigeons. So maybe that's a bad example. But if you give a little bit, you become a benefactor, and actually helps to reinforce this sense that you have something to give. You have something to contribute. And it helps to reinforce this internal sense of wealth. And it reinforces the sense of yourself as a fortunate person instead of as a person who's oppressed, right, by the world around us. And so we want to start emphasizing that active part where we have power no matter what comes at us. We're not overwhelmed by stressful situations or bad situations. We're not primarily driven by what's going on around us. We're gaining control over our experience by gaining control over our actions, and we're emphasizing that active part. So no matter what happens to us, we respond, we can absorb it peacefully, and we can respond with a good heart, with a peaceful response. And that's the habit we're trying to build. I read just earlier today, I read some summary of this book, Atomic Habits, and one of the statements that they made in there I thought was very interesting because it aligned with this pattern that's talked about a lot in Buddhism, which is this habit of craving. So there's a context, we find ourselves in a certain context that stimulates a certain craving. We respond to that craving, and then we get a certain reward. So if you take, well-known, so for example, if we go back to our friend who is a smoker, he's with his friends who smoke. That's the context. He feels some craving, which is the desire to smoke. He responds by either, smoking or trying to resist the craving, whatever. But let's say he responds by smoking, and then he gets some reward. There's a chemical reward for that. So we can take this to our advantage to try to create habits. The context, in our case, we're creating part of this context is this group. Context is often set by a time or place, and we've got a social group here, and this is our context. The craving, in our case, we can turn it around to be a desire to build our habit of inner peace. And And the response is meditating together, and the reward is some sense of peace. But even if you're on your own and you want to build up the habit, you can create a context. So for example, maybe there's a time in your day when you first wake up is a good time, or if you've got uh, when you wake up is a good time, but it may depend on your schedule. Like I've got a lot of morning meetings I often have to get to. But you try to think where would be a little place that I could begin to insert a meditation habit, like inserting a wedge. You know, this expression, the thin end of a wedge, is very, very easy to insert the thin end of a wedge in a place. A knife actually is a wedge. Not sure if you knew that or thought about it that way, but a knife is actually a wedge with an extremely thin end. You can insert a knife in you know, a vegetable, something like that, and cut and then wedge it apart. So you want to figure out where in your life can you begin to insert this thin end of the wedge of this habit, and that's your context. And to begin to create an environment, maybe a place in your house that you reserve as like a little meditation space, or a time that you reserve as a meditation time. The craving, or the equivalent, is a desire, like an attractiveness. And the attractiveness comes from an aspiration or an imagination of what would it be like to have this habit. And so that can help, you know, that can be helped by thinking about people that we admire who meditate regularly. There's some, you know, various famous people, if you admire, you know, celebrities, business celebrities, for example, who meditate, or famous, you know, spiritual teachers, or other friends of ours and so forth, who seem to have a little bit more of an even keel in their life. Those examples can help. Or just imagining, what would it be like if I could respond with peace, no matter what happens in my life, and respond with peaceful actions, and beginning to imagine that. Then taking the action, but making it small to start, just a few minutes, and then building up, but then feeling a reward. And one of the other writers on this topic, B.J. Fogg, who wrote this book, Tiny Habits, he really emphasizes the enjoyment. And he's like, nothing anchors a habit like enjoyment and that reward. And the interesting thing is that your body can generate a reward amazingly easily. And this reward is a sense of well-being. You have, you know, you have basically millions and millions of nerve endings in your body. Maybe even billions, I don't know, of nerve endings, probably billions of nerve endings in your body, like a web, like a mesh covering your entire body. Sometimes they're active, like if you touch yourself, they're activated. But even when you're not touching your hand, there's a potential to experience something. There's a sort of a resting state where your body has a potential to experience all the time. And that potential you can begin to fill with a sense of well-being. And that's what we can do in this meditation. We'll now take some time for meditation. Beginning to fill our body with a sense of well-being. So I'll guide us through this meditation now. If we, again, want to enter into meditation, again, we can find a comfortable position for our body. If you want, you can close your eyes. And again, just become aware of your body. But you can notice that there's two aspects. There are active senses, active experiences in the body, active awarenesses, like the feeling of our bottom sitting on the cushion or chair, the feeling of a stretch and relaxing when we breathe. But there's also this underlying potential to perceive that fills our entire body. Our whole body has this resting potential to perceive. It's the same with our thoughts. There are active thoughts, active imaginations and stories, but there's also this passive potential to think, potential to be aware that pervades our mind. Our mind and body both have this huge potential to perceive. Try to feel this, especially in our body. And then we can begin to invite our body to relax. If it helps us to stretch our neck or shoulders a bit, if we find any areas of tension, it can sometimes help us to stretch a bit. But we begin to invite our body to relax and invite a feeling of well-being. Just invite our body to feel comfortable, to feel happy, to feel at peace. Our body can send an enormous range of inputs, an enormous amount of input about what we're feeling. And especially as we breathe and allow each breath to relax us further, we can invite a sense of well-being to fill our body, as if we're caring for this body that has cared for us so much throughout our life. And we can conclude by just feeling so happy that we set aside this time to learn about and to build our inner peace. And just thinking what a powerful start we're making to building this habit, like the thin end of the wedge, bringing greater and greater inner peace into our life. And we can make a determination to reinforce and repeat this habit again and again throughout our life. And then we can open our eyes and arise from our meditation. Great. Thank you all so much. And so we have a few minutes if you have any questions you wanted to ask following up from the session, um, or points to share.
Hey Andrew, I have a question.
Hey, Ishita.
So I wanted to know, so is there anything right or wrong about meditation, that this is the right type of meditation, or this is you're doing wrong if you are sitting not sitting upright, or not doing things like that? So is there anything about meditation that is right or wrong?
A great question. It's I think you should use your internal sense of right or wrong as your main guide. If you feel like you're having some greater sense of peace, then that's a sign you're moving in the right direction. Um, and if you're finding yourself a bit more agitated long term, that's a sign that you're kind of moving in the wrong direction. So long term, you want to be looking for some increase in peace and relaxation and ease. But I would say you really want to watch out for this very judgmental mind that can come up, that always judges ourselves in comparison with others, or is really hyper concerned about, am I doing it right? And a lot of worry and so forth. Um, we should treat meditation like we were a child at play. So kids don't worry too much about whether they're doing it right or not. Like, is there any right or wrong way to play with Legos? Well, yeah, there kind of is. Like, ideally, you want them to stack together and so forth, but it's really much better to learn that on your own than to get overwhelmed like we can as adults with this sense, oh, I'm terrible at Legos, right? I'm just, because I can't build the Taj Mahal out of Legos, I'm just obviously not not going to be a Lego master. So normally we spend most of our life so hyper focused on comparing ourselves with others that we can bring that mind into meditation, and we can worry way too much in the beginning. If you just sit down on your couch and start to meditate and then fall asleep, great. If that's your first experiences with meditation, great. You're going to end up a lot more peaceful than you were, So you might fall asleep, you might be distracted. Don't worry about it. Focus more on the pattern of setting aside a bit of time and trying just for a few minutes, and don't worry so much about right or wrong in the beginning. And when I say in the beginning, I'm maybe the first few years. I don't know. Until you get that habit, what you're looking for more is momentum of building, of setting aside a bit of time and space for it. Because that's really the most challenging thing, is setting aside a bit of time and space in our very busy lives.
Right. Thank you.
Yeah.
Andrew, I didn't see your questionnaire. So was that something that was an email, or was that part of our community? I haven't quite figured out how to hook up with, or.
Um, I I put in the Slack channel a little poll, and so it might create a notification in the general category, but if it's a bit too subtle or hard to see, let me know, and I'll
Okay.
see if we can make that more clear. It's still there. So the question is, why did you join these sessions? What are you hoping to get out of it? So I'd love to hear
Okay.
from everybody, and I'll send a
All right.
reminder. Great. And I've had a few folks chatting back and forth on that, so feel free to use that community for that. I'd love to, field questions, or if you have things to share with the whole group, that'd be fantastic. And that's why we built that community out, to begin to get some momentum together and to share tips and successes or challenges together, because community can be a big part of helping to stabilize these habits over time. So it's so good to see you all. Always brings joy to my heart to see your faces. So thank you so much. And I'm really thrilled you could be here. All of these sessions are being recorded, so you can share with your friends. I see you're already bringing your friends onto these groups, so feel free to spread these, and we'll build some momentum together for this good habit. Thank you, everybody. Bye.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you.